Welcome to the Angel Wing LLC and to the Foundations of Angel Wing Technical Workshop Series, part number 14. Today is the 19th of February, 2025. We're continuing our exploration of the overall question about the self and trying to understand a multitude of ideas that have been researched in a massive volume that is over 800 pages long. And along those lines, we are looking at various sections of this book just systematically. We're in the second section, second entry at this point. And we're just going to continue on this for a while and see where it takes us. So if you remember from last time, we were talking about, the theories of John Locke and the way that the self is generated. He posited that the genesis of the self exists in episodic memory. So we're going to move further from there into additional ideas regarding this. So, however, empirical evidence drawn from investigations on individuals grappling with amnesia suggest a counterpoint. It proposes that a consistent sense of self might survive, anchored in the preservation of conceptual autobiographical knowledge, even amidst the debilitating loss of episodic memory. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, there are amnesia patients that still seem to have a sense of self despite having serious problems with amnesia. So this other theory states that the sense of self might survive because it is anchored, because it is anchored in the preservation of conceptual autobiographical knowledge. Now, what does that mean? What is that? Autobiographical knowledge is knowledge that is held inside the brain, in the mind, about who one is, about one's developed identity right from childhood. So that autobiographical knowledge is preserved. So even if there are problems in memory, there can be potential problems in memory, but as long as there is the survival and the preservation of the autobiographical knowledge, the sense of self still survives. So let's look at that a little bit in more detail. It's very interesting that if there is damage to memory, which is amnesia, there's some kind of damage, let's say. We don't know what kind of damage that is. It could be neurological, it could be traumatic, it could be whatever. There's some type of damage to the normal function of memory, okay? But despite that damage, there is the survival of the autobiographical information about oneself. And as long as that survives, there is still a sense of consistency that I am Sachin. This is who I am. This is my sense of who I am. Very interesting. So that's a counterpoint to John Locke's theory that memory damage would destroy the sense of self. Well, the more research suggests that may not necessarily be the case. Now, that raises a whole host of questions for us. That if memory is damaged, how can there still be a sense of self when there's problems in memory? Where does that come from? So there's more mystery here than what is even researched, right? So there's also plenty of cases where people, do not have that autobiographical information due to some type of accidents or traumas or brain diseases or damage or something like that. And as a result of that, they do not have that sense of self that survives, despite all that damage. So they don't have that. Now, let's take a look at the next sentence. Simultaneously, there have been, let me see. Okay, hold on one second. Simultaneously, there has been an increasing correlation between the cognitive and affective experiences related to the self and neurobiological mechanisms. Meaning what? That we have cognitive and affective experiences, emotional experiences, we have thinking-related experiences, yes, those experiences are related to the sense of who I am with regards to neurobiological mechanisms. That goes back into something called functional psychology and functionalism. Because there are these mechanisms that are working in very intricate ways, that's what's creating our cognitions and emotions. Our cognition, meaning our thinking and our emotions, are created due to neurobiological mechanisms. So those neurobiological mechanisms are generating the sense of self. This is the emergent quality that we've talked about before in philosophy of mind. All right. Well, that may be so, but if that is so, if it's an emergent phenomenon, there's an explanatory gap, which we've talked about that before also. Again, the basic point here is that my qualitative experience of sense of self is that truly dependent, experience-dependent brain maturation? Is it just dependent on the interactions with the people around, the environment around, and then that somehow mysteriously generates the sense of me? Remember, this is a construct. Even identity is a construct, right? So researchers are trying to probe this in terms of the research methodology and to try to list these constructs, to try to operationalize them, and then to try to measure them also, try to see if they actually exist. All right, so this congruence opens up avenues for contemporary research endeavors to unravel a foundational comprehension of and profound insights into the labyrinth and contextually driven constructs of human identity. That's what I was just saying. That just says it more elaborately. So this congruence between neurobiological mechanisms and the personal, affective, cognitive experiences, there's a congruence between the two. There's a lot of research that goes on to try to unravel a foundational comprehension. To try to understand. Researchers are always trying to understand why it's happening, how is it happening, how is the self developed. Okay, and as a result of that, to unravel a foundational comprehension and profound insights. Insights into what? Insights meaning knowledge, wisdom, into the labyrinth of identity, of human identity, of contextually driven constructs. The labyrinth of constructs, the labyrinth and contextually driven constructs. So we're not talking about just one construct. Human identity is not formed out of one construct only. It is formed out of potentially many different constructs. Human identity is one big idea. It's a big construct in itself. But it's a labyrinth. It has so many pieces, a memory and experience, and it has energy and all the other things that we talk about. Not to mention all these different theories about the individual in the environment, in the family, in the society. There are constructs upon constructs, and that is why we have written here in this write-up here that it is a labyrinth. It is a labyrinth of constructs. It's not a small few number of ideas that just pull together. It's not like that. There's so much involved in it. There's neurological process involved. There is all different types of experiential phenomena. Of course, there is the conditioning of the brain. Yes. So the point that was being made is that there is a labyrinth of constructs that are contextually driven. They're contextually driven, meaning that the constructs themselves are developed within context. You see, so now this is another very intricate process. The way the constructs are developed, even just something like the word memory or cognition or emotion or desires or experience, these are words. These are constructs that have been developed. The words have been developed. The ideas behind them have been developed over centuries, perhaps. And as a result of that, there is a labyrinth of constructs that come together that form this bigger notion of identity. You see, and this is where this is very difficult to unravel this and to try to really get to the bottom of it. It may not be possible to get to the bottom. It's extraordinarily complex. So the point is that when we really look at our own lives, and from a research academic point of view, obviously children are conditioned. Obviously, there's imprinting. There is the cultural conditioning. There is the experience-dependent maturation of the brain. Without experience, the brain doesn't mature. Without relationships, the brain cannot function. It's not possible. We live within the structure of relationships. We cannot develop our brains. Our brains cannot biologically mature into what we would call as a functional human being without interaction with other individuals, without interaction with other people, without the bonds of attachment. Attachment is another construct. It's not possible for the brain to mature without all kinds of binding interactions. And those interactions form that sense of identity. And that identity, that independent sense of identity forms later on in the identity formation phases during teenage and beyond, adolescence and beyond. But in the pre-teenage time, it's just a lot of conditioning that's going on. You're not going to have really a 7-year-old questioning much of anything. They're just going to pretty much follow whatever they're told to do, assuming they're following it, or they may be rebellious against it, simply because their instincts and they want to do some other things. But they don't have the ability yet to question much of anything. Or, of course, there's no independent thinking at that point. So even the development of independent thinking, independent contemplation, is all based on the maturation of the brain. And then eventually, the hope is that it can mature to such a level, and that's what the self-mastery construct is about. It's another construct. It's about this notion that we can mature and evolve, so we can evolve beyond all of our conditioning. That may be possible. It may be only partially possible, right? So we don't know. That's something that is worthy of further exploration. All right. So having said that, I'm going to go to the next line here. Building upon these neurobiological linkages, recent investigations have initiated a deeper exploration of how the perception of the self may be tethered to specific brain regions. The hypothesis is that the prefrontal cortex, responsible for higher ordered cognitive functions, plays a cardinal role in self-related cognitive processes, meaning the prefrontal cortex, the bigger, the more evolved part of the brain, where higher ordered cognitive functions exist, that is playing a major role in self-related cognitive process. My ability to reflect on myself, my ability to know who I am, to see who I am, to navigate through my own experiences. This is based on the health of the prefrontal cortex. So this is very interesting. I think there is a lot of neurobiological evidence for this. This is why meditation or spiritual development, religious development, those kinds of things are useful in terms of activating higher brain function. There is evidence on this at this point. In many ways, that systematic meditation, mantra meditation, religious prayers and religious studies and things, and contemplating on higher ideas and higher ideals, what does that do? That changes the way the brain works. It actually produces neuroplasticity. It rewires the brain. It creates a better flow of neural activity within the prefrontal cortex. So brain function can evolve, can grow, can develop further based on higher and better quality experiences. And in some sense, or in many senses really, our entire journey in Angel Wing is about trying to awaken the dormant potential of our own brain. That's what self-mastery could be conceptualized as. Now in this academic exploration on, twice a month that we're doing now, we can see that there is quite a bit of interconnection academically to understand the construct development, construct validity, to look at neurobiological mechanisms at work, in addition to the concept of identity, that even the concept of identity in the mind of a researcher can be said to be the product of higher brain function, to be able to reflect on past knowledge and then to formulate new theories, new ideas. Researchers, scientists, How do they do that? It's the brain. If you are talking about brain, it's the brain, right? So is there advantage in this? Certainly there is. Certainly there's a lot of advantage in this type of probing. I'm going to go ahead a little bit here and just go into a little bit of a background regarding self-psychology. We'll get back to that paragraph next week and finish it up next week. So what is self-psychology? Self-psychology is a school of psychoanalytic thought developed by Heinz Kohut, if I'm saying that word right, if I'm saying his name right, in the latter half of the 20th century. It represents a significant departure from classical Freudian drive theory, emphasizing the development and maintenance of a cohesive sense of self as the central organizing principle of personality, instead of focusing primarily on instinctual drives like sex and aggression and their conflicts. Self-psychology places the experience of the self and its relationship with others at the heart of psychological health and dysfunction. Okay, so what is the difference here in terms of self-psychology versus classical Freudian drive theory? Classical Freudian drive theory is about the fact that we have all kinds of instincts. There's the sexual instincts, there's the survival instinct, there is the fight-flight response. It's just baser types of instincts, aggression and the development of the ego, things like that. These are instinctual drives that are developing our personality, developing our sense of self. Classical Freudian theory would probably make that type of an assertion. And again, it's very intricate. We don't have time to go into it, but in a summary way, we can try to understand it that way. Now, self-psychology, the way this was started out by Heinz Kohut, and there's a lot of philosophy behind it also, it has to do with our experience of life, the experience of the self, and the relationships with others. Now, what are some of the key concepts here? So the self in self-psychology, it refers to what? It's not a thing, but a process. Kohut, the researcher, viewed the self not as a fixed entity like the ego, but as a dynamic, evolving experience of oneself. This experience includes feelings of vitality, cohesion, continuity, and agency, meaning free will. A healthy self feels whole, strong, and capable of pursuing goals and maintaining relationships. I think there's a lot to be said in that paragraph. We talk about energy quite a bit in our Angel Wing program, and even that's mentioned here. Maybe the word energy is not so much a word used, but strength is used. Cohesion, vitality, free will. It all implies the good flow of good quality energy, right? So what is his notion? That the sense of self is a dynamic, evolving experience of oneself. It's dynamic. It changes from childhood into adolescence, into young adulthood, and later on. So there's a cohesion that develops eventually. There's a vitality. There's vitality about who I am, our ego strength, as it is called, self-worth, ego strength, self-perception, self-esteem. These are all part of the cohesion and vitality aspects. But it's dynamic. He's not saying that it's a static entity. So academically, meaning in terms of research, his perspective is that there's an evolution based on experience of life, because we're experiencing ourselves. Now, he doesn't use the word consciousness or Atman or Brahman or any of those Vedanta terminologies that we're going to talk about later in our in-person retreat at my place. But that's beyond all of this that we're talking about even here. So we'll leave that discussion for that time. But here, this is a psychological phenomena. These are all psychological ideas, right? Now, this is interesting. He talks about two poles here, and he's using the word bipolar model not in terms of the disorder, but that there's two poles of the self, two fundamental poles. So one pole of the self is grandiose, exhibitionist self, mirroring needs, meaning this pole encompasses the need to feel admired, validated, and appreciated. It's the look at me, I'm wonderful aspect of early development, essential for building self-esteem. A healthy self-expression of this pole leads to ambition, assertiveness, and sense of personal value, right? So the sense of the me, you can say ego, but if you want to use a different word here, it's a pole, It's a psychological pull where there's a demand, a need to be admired, to be validated, to be appreciated. Again, this happens in the context of the mirrored relationships. That's what it is. So, and that is essential for building self-esteem. If we don't get validation from others, we don't get appreciation from others, we don't get some kind of an acknowledgement from others about what we're doing, how we're living, etc. If we don't get that, our self-esteem may not build also in childhood and in teenagers. So the self-esteem may not build. Now, of course, in some of our other discussions, we talk about pure awareness and choiceless awareness. Those are ideas that are far beyond all of this. But that's only there after self-esteem is built. I can only be aware of my self-esteem and the limitations that may be present in that if it's there. It has to be built first. So the self-esteem has to be built for me to reach self-mastery and perceive the structure of self-esteem and perhaps see something much beyond that. Right? But I cannot see anything beyond my developed mind, my conditioned mind, without conditioning. It's impossible. There's just no way that's even possible. Right? So a healthy expression of this pole of grandiose and exhibitionist self leads to ambition, assertiveness, and a sense of personal value. If we don't have motivation, we don't have ambition, we cannot do anything. We cannot get up in the morning also. There has to be some motivation to perform activity in life. And there's clinical implications to these theories also. People have severe depression, or they might have other kinds of problems. They can just feel, very, very much down and very much sad and low energy, things like that, right? So this is grandiose exhibitionist self. This is one pole. The other pole is the idealized parent imago, I-M-A-G-O, if I'm saying that word right, idealized needs. This pole represents the need to admire and merge with a powerful, soothing other. So it's the child's experience of seeing the parent as perfect and all-knowing, providing a sense of safety and security. A healthy expression of this pole leads to the development of values, ideals, and capacity for inspiration, right? So that is the other pole. Need to be admired, need to merge with a powerful, soothing figure, someone that the child looks up to. So there's that idealized parent image. It is a child's experience of seeing the parent as perfect and all-knowing, providing a sense of safety and security. A healthy expression of this pole leads to the development of values, ideals, and a capacity for inspiration. Right, so this is the other pole of individual identity. It's a dynamic evolution. And the third thing, and we'll stop with this today, because I don't want to cover too much information all at one time, that the twinship alter ego need, which is what? The third need, not present in the original bipolar self-formulation, is the need to feel a sense of likeness and belonging with others. This need drives the desire for connection, shared experiences, and a feeling of being understood. So this is also needed, connection with others, likeness with others, belonging with others. This is called the twinship alter ego need. So this is the third need that is part of this model. All right, so this is part of self-psychology. There's a lot of other points here, but I don't want to overwhelm it too much. I mean, there's, mirroring self-objects and idealized self-objects, and if you go into further analysis, there's empathic attunement, which is what the key to healthy self-object functioning is empathic attunement, the caregiver's ability to accurately perceive and respond to the child's emotional needs. This doesn't mean perfect responsiveness, but rather good enough responsiveness that allows the child to feel understood, validated, things like that. So there's quite a bit involved in this. These are called self-objects in this theory of self-psychology. Optimal frustration and transmuting internalization. So these are intricate theories. There's quite a bit involved in it, but I'm just trying to open it up a bit, and then we'll get much more into it next time. All right, so I'll stop the recording here, and we can get into some conversation if anybody wants to say anything. All right, so here we go.